Okay, tēnā koutou katoa, and welcome to our first Strategy and Advocacy Committee meeting held. Okay, do we have any apologies? Maybe Councillor Brink-Coles?
Councillor Cowles, if he is on the group, is just an apology if he'll be a bit late.
Thank you. Any other apologies? Okay, any declarations of interest? All right, none. Okay, well, let's go straight to reports of the Chief Executive and staff for decision. 4.1, endorsement of Waitaha Canterbury Biodiversity Strategy. So I'll pass this on to Jo.
Thanks, Hannah. Excuse me. So this paper relates to the Regional Council strategy, the Waitaha Canterbury Biodiversity Strategy. So what's being asked for today is an endorsement, and whilst it's not binding, it is a collaborative intention. We do, of course, have two regional councils which are covered by Waitaki, and so the principles of both of them are really important. So the core principles of the document in front of you are protection, restoring degraded areas, and enhancing ecosystems. And the guidance and the common focus is around how we consider our policies and how we implement them. And David's going to speak to the paper and offer some practical examples today. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Jo. Yeah, as mentioned in the paper, we've had more of a watching brief lately over this, but our previous biodiversity advisor, Max Crowe, was a lot more involved prior to him finishing up last year. Obviously, with the two regions, as Jo mentioned, it can be slightly tricky trying to seek that both are aligned, but they have, I guess, different priorities depending on the nature of the region. Importantly, though, this sort of flows from the National Policy Statement on Indigenous Biodiversity, and I guess since 2008 there's been quite a few changes in that space, hence the update by ECAN. And effectively, as signalled in some of the new legislation, particularly the Natural Environment Bill, Indigenous biodiversity is becoming a regional function, so it's less likely that we will be doing sort of policy and advocacy work in this space. I guess when that lands as legislation, we'll then come back to council and confirm a few things around some of our activities, such as the Biodiversity Fund and discretionary funding we provide to other agencies. But yeah, until that happens, we'll wait for that. So effectively, we're in a wee bit of a holding pattern. This really won't impact on any of that work in the meantime that we were potentially going to be doing, such as updating our own biodiversity strategy. That's on hold until the legislation lands. And the flow-on effect really means that it'll impact more on our sort of physical assets that we might choose to work on and improve, such as parks and reserves or roadsides, that type of thing in the Canterbury part of our district. So if we're doing work around a Marama, Ohau, etc., we would look to try and align with this type of thing in terms of what we were planting or maintaining. I know that the team are already doing that anyway, so it's kind of a default position now, choosing Indigenous species over exotics for different reasons. So I think impact on council is pretty minimal in terms of those implications. As I mentioned, our work sort of at the policy and planning aspect is paused. Those provisions of the proposed plan that related to biodiversity are now withdrawn, so there's no flow-on effect there. And yeah, essentially, as part of our, I guess, agreements with regional councils, triennial agreements, that type of thing, we try and work together and endorse these type of documents that do span the region but have some impact on us. Happy to answer any specific questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. Do we have any questions or comments? Yes, Mia Tivender.
I guess just to pick up on some of Mr. Campbell's points, the challenge of being across two regions is that things don't often perfectly align. But this is a reasonable alignment through this space. And I guess for us, it's that idea of having a bit of a regional perspective is going to be more and more necessary. And if there's any issues with what we've got here, I think what we need to do is bring it back to the process and go, how do we create a process that sits in behind these conversations, recognising that by the time there is a worked up document that comes to the mayoral forum to be adopted, there's been another whole lot of council's eyes over it as well. So the ability to change it becomes quite limited. So I guess just highlighting that I don't think this is a document that steps very far at all from where a lot of our positions lie already. So I don't see a lot of risk, but certainly interested in where the conversation in that respect goes. And if there is some concerns, it's around the decision would be for us not to endorse, just recognising that this is a new council this is being put in front of, and it's certainly not a piece of work that I've been across up till now. But yeah, just recognising we need to work out what are game stoppers or showstoppers for us and which ones are. This is part of a regional conversation and we need to get better at these conversations.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, Madam Chair, permission to speak. I'm not a member of this committee, but it does seem to me that a recommendation that the committee may wish to send to the council is either premature or radically compromised by changes that have occurred in the political environment since the Waitaha Canterbury Biodiversity Strategy 2025 was adopted. I was part of the group that went up to Christchurch to talk to with other councils about that strategy, and that was 2 or 3 years ago. And I'm not sure that the anything in the NPSIB would have any traction at the moment. I notice we're citing clause 3.23 as something that requires local authorities to have regard to it. I also note that if under priority and strategic content, it's noted that the planning bill does not include a biodiversity function for territorial local authorities, which might render our adoption of the regional strategy null and void. Rather, the natural environment sets this function for regional councils, and I would imagine that's one of the things that's going to be in the melting pot with regard to the mayoral committee that's going to actually work out how and what regional councils do and the focus that they have. So I just wonder whether we shouldn't ask officers to actually look at the Waitaha Canterbury Biodiversity Strategy and report what, if any, elements of it have survived the revising of the RMA by the abolition of the old Act and the introduction of the Planning Act and the Natural Environment Act, and also the extent to which NPSIB has any ability now to compel or require us to do anything. So I just have a feeling in my waters that it's actually, things have changed so much that a review of what the strategy actually now means, and therefore whether we should adopt it in whole or in part, should take place before we send this recommendation to council.
Thank you for your contribution. Mayor Tevendale.
Just a couple of things to pick up on this. So this endorsement has been requested of us by the 6th of March. So I guess the decision on the table isn't what information we can have come back to a council meeting, and that's the reason why it's sitting at this meeting, is that we don't have that time frame and the ability to spend that time on it. So if there was a concern, that would be a non-endorsement at this stage within those timeframes rather than a more information kind of base. So I guess what I'd recommend through this is, and I'll walk past Mr. Campbell to address some of your comments, but we need to look at the detail and if there's any concern on the detail, because I get the wider political landscape. We currently have our own biodiversity strategy. This work doesn't stop and this intention doesn't stop and behind all this. So we've got to look at the detail and say, are we comfortable with the detail in this? And is there any issues we've got with that? And if there is, then that there's a non-endorsement and we can probably write to them explaining where our concerns lie. If there's no absolute concern in the detail, where the national direction is sitting, I think isn't so relevant in this, because if it gets superseded, it gets superseded, and that's a conversation on that day. But this is an intention that we are at the moment still, while all the changes are happening, we're not pushing stop on everything, and this work has already been done. So just recognise in the conversation, we need to stick to the detail here rather than the overall process, whether or not it's valid, because every other council in Canterbury obviously believes this is valid, and we've just got to make our decision on whether or not we support the content of it.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell, you had something?
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Hopkins raises a good point. I think it's more aligned to the timing, because obviously it's got a 2025 date, which was ahead of the RM reform bills that we've just considered. So it's kind of almost retrospective what they're seeking here, but the Mayor raises a good point that this is kind of the here and now. I think the way it's written is that, and the link with NPSIB, we would only have to consider it if we were progressing with biodiversity in our proposed plan or other plans. So it gives us an out clause. If the legislation says you don't have to do that, it's not your function, then it's kind of less relevant. Where it does come in, and it's kind of set out on the analysis and discussion with the 3 bullet points, is where we might be involved with things like the Waitaki and Waio Zone Committee, where they are probably looking at projects there to say what areas. Well, there might be a new zone committee formed, but in those cases, working with the local councils and their reps and landowners and other groups, saying what projects have we got in our patch that could align with this and help landowners do work in the Waitaki part of that catchment group. And that's been used in the past when they're funding projects for biodiversity on both the upper and lower zone committees for Waitaki. So I think it's going to have more of a role to play in that kind of discretionary work, but also the advocacy work that ECAN are probably going to be leading more so than us in that space.
Thank you for that. So what I'm hearing is there's more on the action plan, and the integration and the implementation part that is where we can have some input. Councillor Thaunen, did you have a comment as well?
Yep. So I went through this with a bit of a fine-tooth comb, because this is where SNAs come from, and we know that how contentious they are. But I was actually quite pleased when I went through it. It had all the good stuff and almost none of the bad stuff. It doesn't bind us to things, and it's a lot more about supporting and empowering landowners rather than the previous modus operandi was sort of landowners would allow access to their land. There'd be a report, they'd get a free report, not realising it was then going to be used against them to put a SNA on their land. Whereas this here has none of that. It's very much about supporting and empowering landowners. There's 1 or 2 bits and pieces in there that we probably don't like, but we have to have regard to it when we do plans and policies under the RMA or its replacements, and it's not give effect to. So there's a big difference there. We can take the bits we don't like out of the plans. We can work with our landowners and not against them. And so I'm actually, I'm quite happy to endorse this today.
Thank you for that. Councillor McCone.
Thank you for answering that, Sven, because you've answered all my questions. So on that basis, when the new RMA comes in, or comes into effect, will that change much of what's already there, or we don't know what's already there? My point being, can we endorse it, but until such time as the new legislation becomes law?
Yes, Mr. Kimball.
Yeah, it's a good point, Councillor McCone. The new legislation will change our functions for biodiversity, and as I said, they'll they'll shift to regional councils is what's signalled. So therefore, this strategy would kind of wholly be ECAN implementing that under the new Natural Environment Bill and the NPSIB. Our functions will shift to be more as an asset owner and developer of parks, reserves, that type of thing, and working with lots of those zone committees or other groups. So the strategy probably doesn't need to change in that respect or wait till that bill passes. It sits there as the overarching document. If our functions are, I guess, diluted as a result, there's less for us to worry about.
Councillor Mayor Tavendale.
I think just picking up on that, obviously things moving more into the regional council space and then the regional councils moving into a different or potentially null and void space, which is still to be seen. It will come back to us at some stage, but I think at that stage we've got a whole new conversation to have around our regional strategies. So I think this is a bit of a holding pattern in many ways.
Thank you. Councillor McCone.
So just an aside from that, so it's a strategy document, I suppose, but is it a directional guideline that will affect consents going down the track, or we just can sit outside those and make our own rules further down the track? Is that it? I'm just trying to work out how it works.
Yeah, so the consenting regime is set by the National Policy Statement on Indigenous Biodiversity, and then what flows through into our district plan. So at the moment, it's only in our old operative plan that we have the rules that trigger consents. This is a strategy, so it doesn't trigger that kind of requirement under the RMA so much as a set policy. And we know that this national policy direction is being amended by government as part of that reform as well.
Oh, thank you.
Madam Chair, a very quick question, if I may.
One more and then I'll pass it to Councillor Holding.
Oh, David, I thought the NPS IB had been withdrawn. Okay.
Okay, Councillor Holding.
Oh, just noting if there isn't any more questions, I'd be happy to make a recommendation today, noting concerns shared by members, but noting that the endorsement is not binding.
Thank you for that. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Thowning. We'll put it to vote. Are those in favour? Aye. Those against? Okay, that is accepted. So thank you very much for that. I think it was good discussion, good stewardship, good questions, and that we can go ahead with this one. Thank you. Okay, our next item on our agenda. Okay, let me get my pages. Okay, we're looking at page 88. Okay, so we'll go to 5.1 committee terms of reference. So I will pass this over to Ms. O'Neill. Page 88.
It's page 88. Mel.
I was going to say, I might just jump in here if that's all right, Chair. So essentially this is our first ditch effort at getting our terms of reference up and running, and it's so that we can get moving on our work in the committee sense. I think the intention behind the committees is to both share the workload, but also to really expand on some of the strengths we've got around the council table. And so this is a first ditch effort, and I think that it may end up needing some refinement. The discussion we had around the council table was in around a year's time, we will revisit this to see, is it working? Is it the right membership? Are we doing things right? Has it got the right level of clarity around it? Before then, if something isn't working, we do have the ability to revisit as well. The intention really is for, especially in this strategy and advocacy committee, for us to slowly build up an idea of the strategies that are coming before council and having a bit of a wider picture as to where our strategy, when our strategies come to us and what we're trying to achieve and how we can sort of build a longer term view of that. And then our advocacy is much the same. And I think that's become even more important in the environment we're working under reform. So the ability for us to be really, really clear on what our messaging is to, in particular, central government and some of the players up there, and also who we want to target. It's probably not a great term with that messaging, because I think that becomes really important, so that we've got a really clear effort and we work out when that conversation is us as Waitaki District Council, when it's with wider players in our community, so we've got the right people in the room for the right conversations, and when it's more of a regionalised conversation and what we need to get across. So our advocacy planning, I think this term more than ever before, is vitally important for us to get our community's best foot forward and to actually have an outcome at the end of all this that is preferable for our community. So that's what the intention behind this term's reference is.
Thank you for that, Mia. Do we have any comments or questions in regards to the terms of reference? Any comments or questions from members of the committee?
Well, the matters are going to council, Madam Chair.
I endorse what our mayor has just said, and right on the bottom of the second last page, it says terms of reference will be reviewed every 3 years or earlier if directed by council. I just wonder if we could just add a bit more wording in there somewhere, be it or earlier if requested by the committee itself, or just so you're covering the whole thing and make it broader.
Yeah, thank you for picking that up, and that was discussed, earlier than this. Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, I would hope the committee might consider the possibility of reviewing its terms of reference annually, something I'd like all three committees to do. And I have one anxiety in terms of the brief, and I'm just trying to find the yes, it's on page 89. There are powers to act. I think that 2 is unduly permissive. What 2 says is that this committee can advocate for the district's interests at regional, national and sector levels. I believe that's a council function. If the committee wishes to perhaps advocate at regional and sector levels, possibly, but I don't believe that it's a committee's function to unilaterally determine what the Waitaki district's interests are and advocate for them without recourse to or approval from full council.
Thank you, take it on board. I think in terms of all of us as elected members, if we didn't advocate, it would be a waste of time sitting around this table. I think that's fine in terms of the overarching strategy that we had developed insofar as the advocacy role. That's really important, and it's the function of this committee is to oversee and to support the overall whole of council advocacy role and function. Mia Tevendale, you had your hand up?
Yeah, just touching on, and I do take your point, Councillor Hopkins, around the role. I think it is, and I think Councillor Fanini really hit the nail on the head. It's all of our jobs to advocate, but I also see this committee as being a really strong voice in that. And just note that the chair is currently in that space a lot. What I'm trying to do is really empower you all to have a role, because I think we all wear different hats, and this committee, I want to see us looking a bit broader across our community as to how we can advocate for them and to have a role. I think the majority of this committee is in the planning around advocacy and, setting out a really clear direction of travel. So I do take your point, whether or not it's advocate for Waitaki's interests, which I think they will do anyway, so I have no issue with the wording myself. But it's advocate and plan.
Plan and advocate.
Plan and advocate, just to be really clear that I see this being a really good opportunity for us to be a little bit more aligned in our approach to these conversations.
Thank you for that. Councillor Holding.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with those words about the plan. If we can actually put some structure in behind what we're advocating and why it's probably going to be a more powerful on every level to have it. In the past, we've done sort of piecemeal approach to some of those things. So a unified voice would be a lot stronger.
Thank you for that. Any other feedback or comments?
Can we agree on an amended set of words?
Is everyone happy to add those slight additions? Okay, if we can.
The terms of reference are on the committee agenda to receive it because they come from council to the committee and they're a direction from council as to what council wants the committee to do. So it's not really possible for a committee to change its own terms of reference without going back to council. Sorry about that. Regarding the review, you did pass a resolution that these would all be reviewed in a year. So that's now a resolution and it's on the work plan.
I guess just to respond to that, what we can do is we can pass a motion that the committee would like to see certain words added, and that will be a recommendation through to council for them to be adopting. Would that be fair?
Yes,
Thank you. So I think we can still achieve the same thing, it's just not as immediate.
Thank you for that. Did I have a mover for the recommendation? Okay, do we have a seconder? Mayor Tavendale? Okay, we'll put it to vote. Those in favour? Those against? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Okay, that brings our agenda items to a close. So we did move to go with the recommendation, and I assume that councillor Linwood.
It's going to receive the reports and non-reports. Or was that?
Yes, that's what I understood.
Thank you.
Have we covered all the procedural items that we need to? Okay, that brings us to the end of our agenda. And then we can call our meeting to a close. Okay, thank you very much.